liberal hawks, the late great Justin Raimondo had some great things to say about it. And it all starts with the NATO intervention in the Yugoslav wars. So I wanted to perhaps reference Raimondo again because he's just he's pretty spot on, though I don't agree with his projections of the future. But he said the war in Yugoslavia is really close to the neoconservative hearts because that was the thing that basically takes the post-American, post-1945 American foreign policy and puts it on life support. And then it just implicates it in Bosnia. And the Republicans uh, basically get something out of it. They pretend, oh, hey, it's a continuation of the pre-Gorbachev Reagan policy. And they, get to pretend, reap the political rewards because, they did what the intelligence media complex requires of them. And but even better, it was natural for Clinton because he gets to turn the kind of engineering skills of the American liberalism into places like Haiti and Somalia and Bosnia. Conservatives can pretend to be skeptical, but at the end of the day, they're applying the same shock doctrine. So the timeline of the Yugoslav War, I don't want to go back to the Habsburgs, but it's about about this kind of myth making, this kind of astroturfing you see them do, right? He talks to AIPAC and he gets all the Jewish organizations and the media on his side for this. They establish this popular myth that the West stands idly by while Bosnia burns and had to be shamed in intervening in 1995. And then they end the war and everything's fine. But that was bullshit because they were intervening from the very beginning. Like right in 1992, they were negotiating with the Bosnian Muslims, and they influenced the Muslim leaders to engage in these kind of rejectionist policies, which only seem to fuel not only the war in Yugoslavia, but also these the kind of Muslim militiamen who the U.S. always liked to use to attack Russia's soft underbelly from the south. And that's where you get groups like Al Qaeda, and that's where they collaborate once again. After the Afghan war with these Wahhabist factions. So, which is ironic because they call Milosevic or whichever Krasnik or however you pronounce it, these various Serbian leaders and any other leader they don't like in Bosnia, oh, that's the Bin Laden of this place. But it's funny because right there, you have the involvement of the actual Bin Laden, the Bin Laden. And this conflict, you can go back to at least World War One. But long story short, after the Cold War, they have 6 constituent republics: Bosnia Herzegovina, Croatia, Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Slovenia. And Serbia is split into 2 smaller provinces called Kosovo and Vojvodina. And 1992, this federation falls apart. A conflict breaks out in Bosnia. Bosnia wants to split off, and that just kind of gets the dominoes falling. And the Bosnian Muslims are apparently under siege in Sarajevo in 1993. Then in central Bosnia, the Muslim army has to fight the Croats who want to be a part of Croatia. In 1999, they intervene on behalf of Kosovo and these ethnic Albanians. And so the Bosnians and Albanians kind of become tools of U.S. foreign policy. Now, this Clinton doctrine is a carbon copy of the Zbigniew or the Brezhnev doctrine of limited sovereignty that supposedly justifies the Soviet-led occupation of Czechoslovakia in 1966. Oh, hey, Hillary Clinton supported that. Imagine that. And even better, they hire Madeleine Albright, who is basically the spawn of Brzezinski, who is this big cold warrior. And she has all this baggage due to her own background, this anti-Serbian baggage that becomes key in instigating all this. So you get these awful centrists like Nick Cohen, who says that America needs to be the guy who the mighty nation that's capable of doing good, and he cites the Bosnia and Kosovo as like a success. But it's kind of anyone who looks at these countries can't. It's like they use something they know people are going to be unfamiliar with to promote interventionism as successful, which is insane, frankly. But even Albright herself and Clinton both said that this was a credibility test. This was like a test run for this post-Cold War doctrine. Clinton says that if he didn't bomb Serbia in 1999, that NATO would have been discredited for failing to defend the very values that give it meaning. And I think that's probably the clearest example of the this foreign policy continuity, seeing as you get Clinton basically doing the exact same thing as Bush would do later in the Iraq War, ignoring international law, dismantling the Westphalian kind of system, not caring about sovereignty, but he instead injects this parsimonious garbage. And, throughout this, starting in 92, Miss Magazine, which is funded by the CIA, kind of describes these Bosnian Serbs as these chauvinist pigs who get into pornography and engage in mass rapes. People like Susan Sontag, which is like Hillary Clinton's court feminist, just engages in all of this promotion of the Bosnian issue. The European Union does this Warburton report in January 1993 that enlists these quote as these feminist groups as cheerleaders for Bosnian intervention, and so you see this merging of imperialism and kind of this identity politics, and that's, I think, the essence of neoliberalism, and it's all top down but shown as bottom up. These people are elites, and without these elites, you wouldn't have the people like the Clintons. And another thing these elites use to prop up these wars is, once again, these Jewish groups and the Zionist memory of history, because remember that all these movies and books and this cultural obsession with the Holocaust peaked during the Clinton years. It was at its highest by far in any other time in history. And this rhetoric works itself into foreign policy and journalism, and it just takes everything. Now, these Jewish Zionists, they're doing this consciously, and they kind of use it to make the Jewish community in the U.S. give it a stronger sense of identity. They did it first with NBC's miniseries in 1978, and then in 1987 they do it again with PBS, making this thing called, I think it was a movie or a documentary called Shoah. And in 1993, the Clintons come to erect a permanent museum in Washington that is publicly funded, and basically their core objective is to manufacture empathy for these the Jews they suffered in the Holocaust. And everyone, when they go in, they get an identity card and get told what's going to happen to them, which, as a person who likes museums, that's actually kind of fucking cool. But again, if I want to cite the ghoulishness of the people who run it, in 2014, that same Holocaust museum claimed to have exclusive photos on Bashar al-Assad's victims in Syria. Now, unless I don't see how that could happen unless they had very close intelligence and political links. But they used that to push the chemical weapons narratives even before the UN tried to assign blame in 2015. They just push it, and that same museum also trains law enforcement, and it just comes. What the fuck sort of museum is that? That's like it's like the state religion of the Zog, really. And another one of these people who promoted it obviously was Abe Foxman of the Anti-Defamation League. Just Google the origins of that if you really want to dive down that rabbit hole. But Abe Foxman, even though he's seemingly loved by the Democratic Party, I got to remind everyone that he used the Holocaust to oppose the Ground Zero Mosque. And which is funny because when the liberals kind of were finally shamed into being like, no, I don't see the big deal. What the big deal is? They're like, oh, well, it's already full of strip clubs and seedy bars and all this other garbage. And I'm just like, well, I think the argument there would be like, why the hell would you want to have a mosque there? Get it away from this awful fucking part of New York. New York is just, it's just trash. Get away from it. Don't, no, it's bad for you. But the chief advantage of these interventionists who started pushing for more intervention with this Bosnian war is that they were really well organized. There were big lobbying firms. They had this volunteer corps of journalists. Uh, and, one man said, in everywhere that it counts in America, it's almost impossible to be too anti-Serb, which is where Madeleine Albright's baggage gets into it, because she hates Serbs. She's just like, there was this video of her yelling, and it's like, get out of here, out of my face, filthy Serbs, or whatever. I think she speaks Czech, but it it does explain that identity politics did have a role in Madeleine Albright's decision to prompt all these ghoulish wars, because she's, I think, descended from Czech Jews. And so not only is she driven by the memory of, all the ethnic tension there, but also she's, driven like very hardcore by the memory of appeasement and Neville Chamberlain, which means that you can basically never compromise on anything. I'd argue that because of this, Holocaust memory, World War II memory, is an inherently has become a stain on. All right, so